Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this launch event and workshop online. Before starting, let me remind a few points. The session will be conducted in English only. No interpretation will be available. The meeting will be recorded, so please stay muted and keep your camera off if you do not want to be recorded. The workshop will be held using a virtual format, so I encourage panelists to mute yourself, except when invited to speak, to turn your camera on and to raise your hand whenever you wish to intervene. Participants are invited to ask all their questions in the chat. Depending on the time left after each panel, speakers will be given the opportunity to answer or to follow up after the workshop. So the agenda of today's workshop is very rich. We will have 3 sessions, as you may see in the slide: presentation of the fiscal and employment database, how to leverage the new fiscal database for research and policymaking, and how to use subnational public employment data for effective policymaking. Without further ado, we will now open the event with welcoming remarks from Mrs. Dorothée Alain-Dupré, Head of the Regional Development and Multi-Level Governance Division of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Region and City. Mrs. Dorothée Alain-Dupré, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Margot. Good afternoon or good morning, good evening. Welcome to all. I'm very pleased to open this event, very important event to launch this unique data sets on subnational finance and public employment. So in collaboration with the European Union, the DG Regio, this database allows us for the first time to open the black box of subnational finance and employment, covering over 550 regional governments and 120,000 municipal governments across 37 OECD and EU countries from 2010 to 2022. I would like to warmly thank the DG Regio for their trust, enthusiasm, and precious collaboration on a day-to-day basis over all these steps and years to make this project materialize. In this event today, we will present these new datasets in detail and how you can make the best use of them. So I will briefly mention 2 points in this introduction: the rationale for developing these new datasets, and second, how they can be used to advance the analytical work on subnational finance, regional development, subnational capacities, and reforms in general. So first, on the why have we developed these works? Well, on the fiscal side, we know that subnational government, regional and municipal government are in charge of many responsibilities essential for economic development, competitiveness. They also play a critical role in public service delivery, in infrastructure delivery, and in responding to global challenges such as climate change, demographic challenge, and so on. Subnational government, they are responsible for 58% of public investment in OECD countries today, almost 55% in the EU, and almost 40% of public expenditure. However, the paradox is that until now, until these new data sets, there was a lack of comparable data across countries in the OECD and the EU on subnational public finance. There was also a lack of comparable data on public employment of subnational government. These two issues are closely intertwined, because if we want to have a better understanding of municipalities and regions' operational capacities and the extent to which they can actually carry on their responsibilities, we need better data on both their financial and human capacities. This is why the European Commission and the OECD have decided to partner to open the black box of subnational public finance and employment at the international level. So we started the work with the first database in 2018, and in the past 2 years, we have gone a step further to develop what we call the REGOFI and MUNIFI datasets, along with pilot databases on subnational public employment. We are very pleased today to share the results of this work. My second point is to highlight why these new data sets will allow significant progress in our understanding of subnational capacities and regional development, more tailored analysis, and more targeted policy advice. These data sets will be instrumental for us in developing our knowledge of subnational government capacity, and I just would like to mention 3 examples. The first is that for the first time, these data sets allow the separation of the regional and municipal levels of government for public finance. Currently, for most countries, the regional level and municipal level are grouped together as the local government sector. But now with these new data sets, we disentangle these levels for the first time. A second example is the fact that these data sets provide granular, disaggregated data for each individual regional and municipal government in 37 countries. The project has produced 2 disaggregated databases for regional and municipal public finance. And this granular comparative information and data will allow deeper analysis on regional and local development, place-based policy making, multi-level governance, to quote a few examples. For the first time, we can compare the expenditure of municipalities of all sizes in the different policy areas of the COFOG national account system. On the revenue side, we can have the detailed breakdown for each single municipality and also have their tax revenues broken down by several categories. The third example is that beyond the fiscal data, we are also now able to better understand municipal employment decomposed by gender, age, and other dimensions at the international level. So to conclude, as you can see, these new data sets open very promising avenue of work to better assess the capacities of subnational government and support subnational reforms. You will go into more detail in each of the sessions of today's event. We will continue working on these data sets and hope to keep improving them in the coming years by adding new indicators, countries, and going even more granular. So finally, I would like to thank again DG Regio for developing this jointly, to thank all the colleagues in National Statistical Institute, Ministries of Finance, Ministries of Regional Development, the Regional Development Policy Committee of the OECD, who provided invaluable insights in this work, and of course, big thanks to the OECD team who developed this huge work. So I will stop there. I will give you the floor back, Margot, and I look forward to a very fruitful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will now pass the floor to Mrs. Anna Wagner, Head of the Policy Development and Economic Analysis Unit in the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission, where she notably oversees the preparation of the new cohesion policy proposal for post-2027. Mrs. Anna Wagner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all. I wanted to welcome also my side all the participants, and also thanking a lot the OECD for organizing this event, and in particular my thanks go to Dorothée Dupré, Isabelle Chatry, and in particular also the project manager Anthony Moizio. But also to my team, Carlo Gianella in particular, who was following this work. And it's really been a significant accomplishment that we have seen. It's an excellent collaboration also. And it's a really exemplary work coordination that took place. On the Commission side, we have supported and been really committed to these projects ever since its pilot phase back in 2018. And I must say that we are extremely happy with the results of the project. I mean, these databases that Dorothée was referring to, the one for regions, the REGOFI, the municipalities related, the MUNIFI, and this pilot database on subnational public employment. I mean, these are really, really crucial, and they represent a very important step in relation to us better understanding that black box that Dorothée was referring to. So from our perspective, these new databases that have been developed in the framework of this project are understand better and to be able to better compare cross-country the situation at municipal and regional level. There are altogether 25 elements in the REGOFI, and 14 out of these are EU-related countries, and that's really huge. What is particularly important for us is the granularity of course, and here just simply to be able to work with this level of granularity, it basically means to us that we understand the characteristics later down the line where we really use it for analytics of individual regions. And in this case, not only individual regions, but individual municipalities. And this is huge because from our perspective, the policy needs to gain back a more place-based and region and territory-specific angle. And we really need to make sure that our geographical desks also have a good understanding of these things the moment it comes to discuss with member states and regions what exactly cohesion policy programs should support and should do. And if we have an accurate and detailed picture of how subnational governments work, which we really are very well placed with this project to get to, then it's a huge advantage in terms of setting policy priorities and policy considerations in this regard. So for us, this is a unique opportunity to improve the knowledge and also ultimately our capacity to implement policies in these territories. And the very first thing this project allowed us to do is to have a specific content which is fully new in the 9th cohesion report. The 9th cohesion report is a treaty obligation for the Commission, and we just published the 9th cohesion report at the end of March. And this time it has a specific content which shows separate figures for regions and municipalities, and it is done in a way that it's shown both for the revenue and the expenditure composition. And this is something we have never had before. So this is really due to and thanks to this project. And one important and general conclusion that we could draw is that the mix of funding sources of subnational governments in the EU is quite heterogeneous. There are different patterns, there are different models that coexist, and that this is an extremely intriguing area, and we need to go into further details and investigate a bit better thanks to these data and with the help of these data to understand, for instance, which model could be more resilient to a shock, to an economic shock, or which model could be more conducive to growth and development. I mean, these are very ambitious questions, of course, but what I'm just trying to say is that these data now allow us to even think about approaching a question. Now, looking ahead, it is very important to involve the communities of researchers and policymakers at all levels in the use of these data. And today's seminar is a great occasion for that. On the Commission side, we will continue following this work very, very closely. Colleagues, and in particular Carlo, are already analyzing the EU data, and they are already looking at interesting patterns that emerge, and they seek to provide new measures of fiscal decentralization. I also understand that there is going to be a presentation later in the workshop by Professor Agnese Sacchi, which is going to be on this topic as some preliminary results. It's going to be super interesting. So just to say thank you, and this is really an eye opener or window opener, this wealth of data and this granularity, and we look forward to work together on these data and for a better understanding of the subnational fiscal levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these insightful remarks. We will now turn to the first session, presentation of the subnational fiscal and public employment databases. And I am pleased to hand over to Mrs. Isabelle Chatry, Head of the Unit Decentralization, Subnational Public Finance and Infrastructure in the Regional Development and Multi-Level Governance Division of CFE at the OECD.
Thank you, Margot. So we'll now turn our attention to the first session, which is the presentation of the subnational fiscal and public employment databases. So it will begin with an introduction of the rationale and an overview of the project by Antti Moisio. Antti is senior economist and project manager in the decentralization, subnational finance and infrastructure investment unit in the regional development and multi-level governance division. Then Brendan Irish, Junior Policy Analyst in the same team, will present the databases and the methodology followed to develop them. And finally, Charlotte Lafitte, Policy Analyst, will discuss some of the key findings from an initial analysis of the data. I now hand the floor to Antti to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Isabel, and good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. The whole team and I are very happy to present the results of this project, which we'll be working for more than 2.5 years now. In my presentation, I will provide a brief description of the joint EC-OECD project in which we have developed databases covering fiscal data at both regional and municipal levels, as well as the pilot database on public employment within subnational governments. And this project has been funded by DG Regio. Next slide, please. Decentralization is an increasing trend in OECD and EU countries, along with other trends such as regionalization and asymmetric decentralization, for example. As a result, regions and municipalities in many countries play an important role in public spending, investment, revenue, and debt. At the same time, in public finance accounting, traditional classifications divide government sectors into central, state, and local levels, and this approach limits the analytical depth and cross-national comparisons at subnational level because regions and municipalities have unique responsibilities and face distinct financial challenges that are not adequately captured by broad classifications. So by going more granular, the new fiscal databases developed in this project allow for a much deeper analysis and comparison than before of revenue, expenditure, and debt profiles across regions and municipalities. This enhanced granularity supports better policymaking and governance, ensuring that the diverse needs and challenges of subnational governments are more effectively addressed. From the public employment aspect, it should be also noted that municipalities and regions employ a substantial proportion of the total public workforce within the OECD and EU. And given their significant role, it is essential to gain a deeper understanding of subnational public employees, focusing on their gender and age distribution and employment conditions. And despite this importance, surprisingly little is known about the public employment at subnational government level, and this poor understanding is probably mostly due to the lack of quality data sources. Next slide, please. So recognizing the lack of standardized and comparable data at regional and municipal levels, the OECD and DG Regio in EU initiated this project to collect detailed data on regional and municipal finances. These efforts have been resulted in the REGOFI and MUNIFI databases, which provide both aggregated and disaggregated data for numerous countries at regional and municipal level. Furthermore, the project also includes a pilot database for subnational public employment, as was mentioned. Our project, spanning from 2021 to 2024, has set forth ambitious objectives. With these databases, we aim to enhance both international and national level analysis and facilitate detailed comparisons of regional and municipal finance across OECD and EU countries. By deepening our understanding of subnational public finance nuances, we seek to improve the standardization, compilation, and dissemination of fiscal data. And this initiative is not just about gathering data, it's ultimately about creating a framework that allows for comprehensive reflection and informed policymaking based on granular financial insights. While this project is now reaching its end, we believe that the work continues, as these kind of databases are never truly complete. We will be really happy to continue the dialogue with all the stakeholders involved. So on behalf of myself and the entire team, I would like to thank everyone who has been involved in enabling this work. And we extend our gratitude also to European Commission and all the experts from various agencies in the countries involved in the study for their support during the data collection and their feedback at various stages of the project. So with these words, I pass the floor to Brendan Irish. Brendan, over to you.
Thank you, Antti. So in this part of the presentation, I will begin by giving a broad overview of the methodology and indicators included in the fiscal and employment databases, and then I'll briefly discuss the main challenges faced during the development. So next slide, please. For fiscal data, we have 4 databases covering both aggregated and disaggregated regional and municipal finance. The disaggregated data is for each region and municipality within a given country, while aggregated data is the sum of all governments at a certain level. So as you can see on the right-hand part of this slide, these cover over 550 regional and state governments and over 120,000 municipalities in 37 OECD and EU countries, with indicators on expenditure, investment, tax, grants, debt, and more. And to get to this point, we needed to develop a rigorous methodology in order to ensure that we could disentangle the subnational level and be able to open, as we said, the black box that is subnational public finance and employment. So on the slide, as you can see, there were 3 main steps. Starting with number 1, we began by contacting national statistical institutes and other national stakeholders to understand what data was being collected and how. We then sent a test query based on national accounting standards to pilot countries. After this piloting phase, we quickly realized that data at the municipal and regional level was more often than not categorized according to a unique system of accounts. So then we began developing tables of equivalence to match country standards as closely as possible to national standards. These tables were then sent back to national institutes for verification. And once this was done, we then began processing the data, which took some time due to the sheer volume in question. The final step in this project was the development of the database architecture and metadata with the support of the Statistics Directorate at the OECD. And finally, we have prepared some initial analysis for the synthesis report and the launch event, which Shahra will talk about after this. If we could go to the next slide, please. I briefly mentioned this before, but to give you a more in-depth overview, in this database, we have breakdowns of expenditure by 6 economic classifications, including the compensation of employees, but also types of capital expenditure and expenditure by the different COFOGs. We also have 5 tax revenue categories, current and capital grants, 3 other revenue categories, and breakdowns by 3 debt categories. These are all subject to data availability, which differs according to the country. We've also included several units of measure, notably per capita, for which we had to collect more population data at the municipal and regional level. We also have data in US dollars with purchasing power parities. And at the aggregated level, we have percentage of GDP and percentage of general government. Next slide, please. So now that we have an idea of the methodology used for the fiscal databases, we'll now turn our attention to the pilot databases on public employment at the subnational level. These cover 26 OECD and EU countries with data for up to 3 levels of government and intermunicipal cooperative bodies with 6 variables of decomposition. Again, the development of these databases followed a similar structure as for the fiscal databases, including engagement with international and national stakeholders, data verification, processing, and the development of architecture. The breakdowns included are by gender, age, hierarchy, occupation, time equivalence, and legal framework. We also sought to separate health and education from core functions, since the status of these workers differed greatly across the countries covered. Next slide, please. I would just like to highlight 4 of the main methodological challenges that we encountered during the development of these databases. First and foremost is that of comparability. As I already mentioned, regions and municipalities report their finance data using unique classification methods. And so there was a large effort on our end to produce tables of equivalence to ensure comparability. Next is the issue of formatting. This varied widely across and within countries, and it made the automation of processing quite challenging. So to overcome this, we produced individual scripts in Python to process the data. The third challenge was that of complementarity, to make sure that this data could be used with other data sources from the OECD and national statistical institutes. To do so, we ensured that each geographical entity was correctly coded to facilitate the combination of data sets. And finally, we experienced some setback to do with data volume. For example, the French municipal data includes indicators for all 35 municipalities over nearly 10 years. And to process this, we needed to access more powerful computational abilities. I will stop here, and thanks for your attention, and I look forward to the rest of the session. Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you. So now I will quickly show a snapshot of some key data that we can draw from these databases now that we have the methodology in mind. So next slide, please. So I will start with the big picture, the aggregated level, as we call it in this project. So if we look at this graph, it is based on the REGOFI database, aggregated, and it shows the expenditure of regions, states, and provinces from 25 countries with available data. And so looking at this data on average, we see that state and regional expenditure only accounted for 8.2% of GDP and 14.3% of total public expenditure in 2021. So we can see that there is a clear distinction between regions in unitary countries in yellow on this graph and federal countries in blue, where state and provincial governments have much more spending responsibilities and fiscal autonomy. On average, we can see that their expenditure in per capita terms in federal countries is 4 times higher than those of regions in unitary countries. Yet, of course, there are always exceptions, and we can see, for example, Mexico and Austria, where state governments are relatively lower in terms of expenditure, or regions in Italy, Japan, or Czechia, where they are more important. So states and region also, we can look at where do they spend, what do they spend for. And so the first item would be current grants and subsidies, 25%, which includes transfer to lower levels of government, such as municipalities, but also staff expenditure and capital expenditure, including direct investment. The next slide, please. But then what we can do with these new databases is to take a closer look at the disaggregated data. And so here the picture is more complex, and it shows really the local nuances that exist across and within countries. So here on this graph, we are still looking at regional government expenditure only in federal countries in USD PPP per capita. So the dark blue line indicates the median value, and each blue dot represents a state or a region. And so what we can see is that the state government level is very heterogeneous in federal countries. In particular, it is in Canada, in Germany, in Australia, in the US, which all have the largest differences between the highest and the lowest spending regions. But it's important to note, of course, that some of these differences can be explained also by the fact that some regions are very densely populated, while others are sparsely populated, but are very dynamic economically. For example, in Canada, there are a lot of differences between the territories and the provinces, which leads to some extreme values. Next slide, please. So the same analysis holds true for regions in unitary countries. So here, for example, we can see that regions in Sweden, in Italy, Czechia, Japan, and Denmark stand out with median regional per capita spending above $4,000 per capita. But we can also see that the widest gaps between the highest and the lowest spending regions are observed in Italy, in contrast with Poland, whose regions are closer in terms of expenditure per capita. Next slide, please. So now the same analysis can be done using our database at the individual municipal government level, knowing that we have much more municipal governments across OECD and EU countries. So this graph shows the range in municipal government expenditure per capita. And so it shows that the 5 Nordic European countries have a very high median value compared to other countries, with Denmark ranking at the top, municipalities. And on the other hand, municipal governments in Malta, Mexico, and Chile have lowest median values. And we also tried to assess the dispersion of this municipal expenditure within each country, using as an indicator the interquartile range. So this indicator measures the spread of the middle half of the sample for each country, excluding the most extreme values. And if we take this indicator, we can see that dispersion of municipal expenditure is particularly large in Korea, followed by Norway and Austria, whereas it is much more narrow in Malta, in Mexico, or in Lithuania, for example. Next slide, please. So these were just some snapshots, and unfortunately, we don't have much more time now, and I cannot show you, but the same analysis can be done with investment, revenue, and debt. But now I'm going to move to the pilot database on subnational public employment. So this database provides, among others, some data on subnational government staff, including women's representation and municipal size. And what we drew from these are these 2 graphs. So they correspond to the municipal level on the left and the regional level on the right, with respectively 12 and 10 countries. And so at the municipal level on the left, what comes out is that the overall number of employees in dark blue increases on average with municipal size until a certain limit, here 60,000 inhabitants, after which it decreases, owing to economies of scale and other factors. And if we look on the same graph at the share of women among total municipal employees, in the blue dots, it decreases as municipalities are larger. At the regional level, the trend is a bit different on the right. So we can see that the average number of employees and the share of women both tend to decrease on average in larger regions in terms of population, although it remains relatively stable from 1 million inhabitants. So this is the first estimate, and in this analysis, it is also crucial to consider the specificities in responsibilities across levels of government, and also the scope and definition of what do we mean with public sector personnel in each country. Next slide, please. And so this is the last slide just to show you that this data can also be translated on maps. And so on these maps, for example, we were interested in looking at the dispersion of gender balance. So the municipalities were divided into 5 equal size groups for each country based on the percentage of women among public sector personnel. So the group differs in each country. For example, for Mexico on the left, if we take the 2 most extreme groups, 20% of municipalities have less than 21% of women in their workforce, which is the light blue, while the 20% of municipalities with the highest share of female employees in dark blue have a share of above 39%. And in Sweden on the right, the shares are different, corresponding to respectively 75 and 81%. But this is still a way to show the dispersion in territorial terms. So I stop here. Thank you very much. And Isabelle can take that.
Thank you, Charlotte, Brendan, and Antti for this great overview of these unique databases, which are now online. So it's great. I will now hand the floor to Carlo Gianelle. Carlo is an economist, analyst, and senior researcher in the Policy Development and Economic Analysis Unit in the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy at the European Commission. So Carlo has a long experience in regional economic development, focusing on technological change and knowledge recombination, industrial system dynamics, and innovation policy, and understanding of how regions can harness innovation to improve their economic performance. He is also the project manager for this project on the EC side, and has been of great support to this work throughout the process. Carlo, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabel, and good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to some of you. Let me also thank the OECD Secretariat for organizing this workshop to present the work on REGOFI, MUNIFI, and the SUBEMP, subnational employment. And in particular, yes, I would like to thank the people who really made all this possible and with whom I have collaborated during these few years. Dorothée, Alain Dupré, Isabelle Chatry, Antti Moisio, and his team, especially Charlotte Lafitte, Marco Vincent, and Brandon Irish. Really, we have had an excellent collaboration over the years, and kudos to you guys for the results presented today. Now, I would like to just take this opportunity to share with you maybe 3 comments regarding the databases, things that have been said already somehow, but that I think it's worth underlining. So the first thing that needs to be stressed, that I think needs to be said clearly today, is how great a job the OECD team has done, how many challenges the team has faced and was able to overcome, mostly in collecting data from so many different sources, which are different in nature in different countries and in terms of the criteria used to compile them. And then developing a taxonomy that could hold it all together, that could make sense of all this heterogeneity now and allow comparability. We have stressed this word, comparison across countries. It's not a given. It's something that we are achieving, that you have been able to achieve. Striking a difficult balance, we know, with the need not to lose information along the way. There are things in the databases that need to be perfected, that need to be fine-tuned, that can evolve, something that can be or will need to be fixed, but this is perfectly fine. This is okay, given the scale and the ambition of the effort. Second thing I would like to emphasize, which has already been said again, is now the possibility to distinguish, and this is for the first time in most cases, between 2 different important levels of territorial government and of territorial governance, that is, regions and municipalities. Now, sometimes in statistics we find subnational governments altogether, mostly, which is already something. We may even not find them. But of course, we know a region is something different with different goals, responsible for different policies than a city, than a small city in a rural area or a big city in a big metropolis. Now we have the chance to consider these things separately, to analyze these 2 dimensions separately. And this is unprecedented. And this is the real new territory to be explored. This is how we see it. Third and final thing I would like to stress is the data we are talking about today, and especially REGOFI and MUNIFI, are complementary to other existing sources, official sources, thinking of Eurostat in Europe that provides official statistics. The data in REGOFI, MUNIFI, SUBEMP fill a gap. They are complementary in the sense that they do not overlap necessarily with official statistics. They are not necessarily completely homogeneous with those sources, but because that was not the objective. The objective was to work in a space that was left empty and to start filling that space. And it's a goal to be able to be fully compatible with official statistics. There's still some route to be done, and REGOFI and MUNIFI SUBEMP will have or have already to enter into a dialogue, into a dialectical, let me say, relationship with other sources of information. And the terms of this dialogue, the terms of this relationship will have to be explored, will have to be defined. And this is a task, this is for us from now on that the data are available. I would just stop here to leave the floor, if possible, for somebody who may want to intervene. Thank you again very much.
Thank you very much, Carlo, for your nice words and great comment and input. Participants, do not hesitate to ask questions and to put questions in the chat. So we are a bit late, but I would like to start and ask a question to Brendan. So given the differences in accounting across countries, could you go into more details on how exactly you address this issue of comparability, which was raised by Carlo? Brendan?
Sure, thank you. Yes, of course, I'd love to address this question. It's very important, and I think it kind of underpins this entire project. So as I mentioned, each country has a different way that they categorize their financial data. And to overcome this, we developed these tables of code equivalence that matched their codes to national standards. And so practically, what does that mean? I think it's best if I just run through a couple of examples. And there are two different types, I would say. So there's one which was kind of exemplified by Colombia, who had all of their data structured with alphanumeric codes. So everything that was coded with A was a revenue. And for example, A3000 was their grant revenue. And then a hierarchy followed from there. So A3010 was current grants. And so we had to go through and match up each of these different codes to one in the name of the code. And so the translation of their code was something based on our translation software that was current grants. And so that matched to our current grant strategy, current grant category. And again, we created these tables. And so once that was done, and as is the example with Finland, we sent this to them for verification. And we had several back and forths with them over a couple of months to kind of fine tune our categorizations and make sure that we were really diving into the details of how they categorized their data and how that would match to the national accounting standards. So that's kind of a brief overview, just so I don't take too much time. But of course, if there's someone else that would like to know more details, country specifics, I think everyone in the team would be more than happy to answer. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Brendan. I think that there is a methodological annex which explains also the process which has been applied and followed. So yes, it has been a hard and complex work to build all these equivalent and to build the comparability. So maybe I will, if there is no question, I will continue. And I will come to the conclusion of the first session in the sake of time. So indeed, these 6 databases provide a unique view on regional and municipal public finance and subnational employment that has never been seen before. So they present, as we saw, great challenges in terms of comparability and methodology related to local finance, accounting, consolidation, and more. And we will discuss further in the next session. But despite these challenges, they also provide an excellent opportunity to researchers and policymakers alike to investigate topics such as regional development, multi-level governance, decentralization, infrastructure investment, and more. So we will also discuss this now. I now pass the floor to Margot for the next part. Thank you very much.